Queer history, no one talks about part 1. Many straight people know about ancient Greek love, how they kind of invented the idea of homosexuality or homophobia. But what about all those other times and places where people loved other people regardless of their gender? Here are 5 queer history facts no one talks about. 1. Hijra recognition in South Asia, ancient, present. In India, Pakistan, and Bangladesh, there exists a third gender known as the Hijra. Often intersex, trans, or non-binary, Hijras have existed for thousands of years. They were revered in ancient texts and performed at royal courts. In fact, they held spiritual roles, acting as blessings for fertility and prosperity. They sang and danced for the royal families and were typically employed by kings and queens to entertain guests and add color to important events. It was only with the arrival of British colonialism that the Hijra became criminalized under sodomy laws that prohibited sexual acts between men or women and women. And the effects of this law still haunt queer communities today. For example, Section 377 of the Indian Penal Code, which outlawed sexual acts against the order of nature, was finally struck down in 2018. This is just one example of the ways that colonial powers targeted and continue to target queer people. And though Hijras have faced intense prejudice, they've also played a huge role in the fight for LGBTQ rights across South Asia. 2. The first Pride was in Algeria. While most everyone knows that Stonewall was a pivotal moment for LGBTQ rights in America, it wasn't the first queer protest. That honor belongs to our friends in Algeria. The first Arab queer protest took place in the midst of the Hijra uprising. The Hijra movement began in February of 2019 after a university graduate was arrested for posting anti-government content online. Soon, thousands of Algerians took to the streets to demand democracy and an end to their president's 20-year regime. While much of the focus was on the protesters and the police, a group of activists used the unrest as cover to take a stand for LGBTQ rights. During the chaos, 2 groups unfurled rainbow flags and shouted, "We are here, we are queer, we are your sons and daughters." These groups braved not just the risk of arrest, but the possibility of police violence. Algeria has a long history of extreme prejudice against LGBTQ people. Homosexuality was criminalized under French colonial rule and remains illegal today. Since independence, authorities have cracked down on any form of public intimacy between men or women and women. But these activists weren't deterred. And though their protest was violently disrupted, their message was clear. Queer Algerians exist and will not be ignored. And since then, more and more people in Algeria and throughout North Africa have been taking up the call for visibility and acceptance. 3. The queer sacred texts of the Dogon people. When many people think of indigenous cultures, they think of tribes in Africa, Asia, or the Americas. But did you know that the word tribe actually refers to any social division in a primitive society characterized by its own territory, culture, and language? And this includes the Dogon people of Mali. According to anthropologist David Le Breton, the Dogon people have always had a strong connection to the spiritual realm, and their beliefs and practices are deeply rooted in animism and a belief in the interconnectedness of all living things. The Dogon are well known for their unique and elaborate masks and for their impressive knowledge of astronomy. However, what many people don't know is that the Dogon people also have a rich history of gender diversity and acceptance of same-sex relationships. In fact, some of their spiritual leaders were believed to be born intersex and were seen as divine bridges between the physical world and the spiritual world. These individuals were highly respected within the community and were believed to have special powers and knowledge. The Dogon people's acceptance of gender diversity and same-sex relationships can be traced back to their religious beliefs and their belief in the interconnectedness of all living things. Their spiritual traditions teach them to respect and value all forms of life, regardless of gender identity or sexual orientation. Unfortunately, colonial narratives have done a lot to erase these indigenous queer cosmologies, but thankfully, scholars are working to bring them back to light. 4. Queer love in ancient China, the passion of the cut sleeve. Most people probably think of ancient Greece when it comes to depictions of homosexuality in classical antiquity, but same-sex love was widespread in China too. From the Shang dynasty to the Qing dynasty, same-sex relationships were openly practiced and even romanticized. A prime example of this is Emperor Ai of Han, who reigned from 27 BC to 1 AD. He was famous for his lavish lifestyle and his numerous male lovers. One day he was reclining with one of his lovers named Dongxian. When Dongxian fell asleep, Emperor Ai wanted to continue enjoying the pleasure of his company, but he didn't want to disturb him, so he cut off his sleeve so he could sleep on the other side of the bed. Now, while that might seem like a strange thing to do, the emperor was moved by the tenderness of the moment. He commissioned a painting of it, and eventually the story became a common metaphor for romantic love between men. In fact, the phrase, "the passion of the cut sleeve," became so popular that there are dozens of paintings and poems about it. Even today, the image of the cut sleeve is a symbol of homosexuality in Chinese culture. 5. Sappho wasn't just Greek, she was worshipped. Sappho is often called the mother of lesbian poetry, but she wasn't just writing about lesbian love. She was writing from experience. Born on the Greek island of Lesbos around 630 BCE, Sappho was part of a lineage of women who lived together in a kind of commune. This group of women, which included Sappho's mother and several of her sisters, managed their own household and property and welcomed female visitors from all over the Mediterranean. Here, women pursued their own projects, whatever they may be, and collaborated on others. In particular, the group was renowned for their music, dance, and poetry. In fact, Sappho's work helped establish Lesbos as a cultural center, drawing even more women to their collective. And the bonds formed between the members of these collectives went beyond friendship. Women in Sappho's circle freely expressed their love for one another, and many formed intimate partnerships. In fact, some scholars believe that Sappho's famous ode to Aphrodite describes her desire to unite with her beloved through a kiss. This focus on female desire and pleasure was unusual in a culture that often demonized female sexuality. And these collectives were more than just homes for queer women. They were sanctuaries where women could love each other, learn from each other, and pursue excellence together. In fact, the oldest surviving record of Sappho's name actually comes from a temple at the sanctuary of Athena on the Athenian Acropolis. And as far as we know, she was the only woman mentioned by name in this way. To the women of her circle, she was practically divine. And though Sappho's work has survived millennia, these female spiritual and artistic collectives have largely been erased from history. And those are just a few of the ways that queer people have impacted the world. Join us next time for more queer history.